You thought it was impossible, right? That what you see in the mirror can actually come to life. But as I stood there, unable to tear myself away from the glass, I realized my reflection wasn't just mimicking me, it was trying to take over, and now I can't escape it. It was an ordinary morning, or at least it seemed like one. I woke up to the hum of the alarm clock, the same sound that had become a monotonous part of my routine. The sun was barely peeking through the curtains, casting a faint glow in the room. I stretched my arms, feeling the usual stiffness in my muscles from another restless night, but nothing out of the ordinary. My day was set in its predictable rhythm: shower, breakfast, work, and all the small rituals that make up life. But that morning, something felt off. I brushed off the feeling as exhaustion. After all, who hasn't experienced that nagging sense of discomfort when waking up too early? But as I stumbled into the bathroom and gazed at myself in the mirror, I couldn't shake the odd sensation. I looked the same, of course. My short brown hair was a bit wild from sleep, and my green eyes were slightly bloodshot, but everything was familiar. I looked like myself. I always did. But for a brief moment, there was something in my reflection that didn't quite sit right. I couldn't put my finger on it. It was like my reflection was slightly out of sync, like it was a second behind me. I stood there for a moment, watching as I brushed my teeth, thinking nothing of it. Maybe it was just the dim lighting playing tricks on me. But then it happened again. I turned my head to the side to grab the toothpaste, and in the mirror, my reflection stayed still for just a moment longer than I did. I paused, toothbrush in hand, staring at the reflection. I moved again, deliberately this time, to see if it would mirror me at the exact same pace. It did, but there was a faint lag, a slight delay. The sensation was subtle but undeniable. My reflection wasn't quite with me, and for a second, just a second, I thought I saw something flicker in the mirror, a glimmer of something different. Something off. I laughed it off nervously, feeling a twinge of unease in my stomach. "It's nothing," I muttered to myself. Just tired. Just tired. I finished my morning routine quickly, eager to get out of the bathroom, but the thought of what I'd seen lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The reflection hadn't been wrong. It was still me after all, but something in the way it had moved, or hadn't moved, was unsettling. I decided to ignore it. After all, what was the alternative? To spend the rest of my day obsessing over a moment I couldn't explain? No. I had to move on, I told myself. It was probably just the fatigue. The rest of the morning was uneventful. I went through the motions: work, lunch, emails, trying not to let the odd encounter with my reflection distract me. But as the day wore on, I began to feel it again. A lingering sense of unease, like a shadow that followed me everywhere, just beyond my reach. It wasn't until later, when I returned home after a long day, that I truly began to notice the oddity creeping back. I was tired again, the exhaustion weighing on me like a thick blanket, but I couldn't resist checking myself in the hallway mirror before going to bed. This time, I didn't just glance at my reflection, I studied it. I stood there, still and silent, as I stared into my own eyes. The longer I looked, the more I noticed. There was something subtle, almost imperceptible about the way my reflection looked at me. It wasn't the same expression I felt on my face. It was as though it was waiting for something, waiting for me to move or speak. But I didn't. I just stared, heart pounding in my chest. My reflection didn't smile, didn't blink, didn't move. And then, just as I was about to turn away, something strange happened. My reflection smiled. It was slow, deliberate, and unnerving. Not a warm, friendly smile. No, this was different. It felt cold, calculated, like a mockery of a smile. My breath hitched in my throat as I froze, staring at myself. My real self was still too shocked to react, but the reflection kept smiling. The sensation of it not being quite right washed over me again, stronger this time. It wasn't just a trick of the light or my imagination, it was wrong. I backed away from the mirror, my heart racing, feeling my hands go clammy. I didn't want to look again, but as I turned away, I couldn't help myself. My gaze flicked back toward the glass just for a moment, and I saw something move. Just a twitch. My reflection was still grinning, but this time it was like it had followed me. It wasn't the same smile from before. This one felt different. It felt more sinister. I shook my head, trying to force the thought from my mind. I had to be imagining things. I was tired, stressed, overworked, that was all. I couldn't afford to get worked up over something as ridiculous as a smiling reflection. I left the mirror behind and tried to push the unease away. But as I lay in bed, the image of that twisted smile refused to leave me. It clung to the edges of my thoughts, growing darker with every passing second. I thought about the way it had looked, alive in a way my reflection shouldn't be. I thought about the faint flickers, the way it hadn't moved with me in the bathroom. Was I going mad, or was something else at play here? I never thought this would be just the beginning of something much worse. The next few days passed in a haze, the unease from that strange encounter in the mirror growing steadily more persistent. I tried to move on, convincing myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the feeling lingered like a shadow, always in the corner of my mind, just waiting to pounce. It was that evening, as I was getting ready for bed, that things took a turn. I approached the bathroom mirror as I had countless times before, brushing my teeth, splashing water on my face, preparing for sleep. The routine felt normal, but my reflection, it was anything but. At first, I didn't notice it right away. I was too focused on the mundane task of getting ready for bed. But then, I felt it, a slight shift in the atmosphere, like the air around me had become thicker, more oppressive. I glanced up at my reflection, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't that my reflection wasn't mimicking me. It was. But it wasn't mimicking me in the usual sense. It was doing something different. As I brushed my teeth, I noticed my reflection's movements were more exaggerated than mine. My own reflection didn't merely mirror the slow, deliberate brushing of my teeth. It was moving its mouth in exaggerated, almost theatrical ways, over-enunciating, as if it was trying to make a performance out of the simplest action. I paused, toothbrush in midair. My reflection, still moving in that unnervingly exaggerated way, paused too. The moment I stopped, it stopped. But the pause felt deliberate, as though my reflection was waiting for me to move again, to give it permission to continue. My pulse quickened, and I dropped the toothbrush into the sink with a soft clatter. I took a step back, my breath shallow as I stared at myself in the mirror. I was frozen in place, trying to comprehend what was happening. Why did it feel like my reflection wasn't just copying me but was somehow aware of me? Why did it feel like it was watching me, studying me? I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, maybe the angle I was standing at. I reached out, touching the cold surface of the mirror as though checking to see if something had changed, if it was somehow warped. But everything was normal. The mirror was clear, the glass was smooth. Still, the sensation that something was terribly wrong wouldn't leave me. The next morning, I woke up with a tight knot of dread in my stomach. I almost didn't want to face the mirror again, but I couldn't avoid it. As soon as I stepped into the bathroom, I felt that same heavy presence in the air. There it was again, my reflection, perfectly still. I moved closer to the mirror, watching myself carefully, trying to control the growing anxiety building in my chest. I raised my hand to touch my face. The reflection raised its hand too, but as I touched my cheek, it seemed to linger. I had only touched my face lightly, but the reflection's hand hovered for a beat longer, as though it was savoring the motion, relishing it. A cold chill washed over me. I yanked my hand away and stepped back from the mirror, trying to calm my breathing. I stared at my reflection and it stared back, unblinking, unyielding. It wasn't that it was just a little off. It wasn't just the slight delays or the exaggerated movements. No, this was something else entirely. It was as if the reflection had its own will now, a will that wasn't my own. As the day wore on, I tried to push it all aside, pretending like everything was fine. But each time I passed a reflective surface, I felt that unsettling tug in my gut. My reflection was never quite right. But it wasn't until that evening, when I walked past the hallway mirror, that things truly began to unravel. I caught a glimpse of myself out of the corner of my eye. I didn't stop, but then I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound. A whisper. It wasn't coming from me, but from the mirror. A low, chilling murmur, almost like a voice calling my name. I froze in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to face whatever was happening to me, but the whisper continued, soft, insistent, calling my name. Reluctantly, I turned to face the mirror. What I saw made my stomach churn. My reflection wasn't standing still, waiting for me to move. No, it was actively shifting, like it was alive, twisting itself into new postures, bending in unnatural ways. The smile from before was still there, that cold, mocking grin stretched across my face. But this time, it was more than just a smile. My reflection tilted its head to the side, watching me with a twisted curiosity, as if it was waiting for me to make the next move. It took a step toward me. No, not just a step. It lunged forward, pressing its hand against the mirror from the inside as though trying to break through. The glass rippled ever so slightly where its palm touched, and for a moment, it felt like the mirror was breathing. I stepped back, stumbling, feeling the panic rise in my chest. This wasn't just a reflection anymore, it was something else, something trying to reach out. My heart raced and I had to fight the urge to run, but no matter where I went, no matter how fast I moved, I knew that feeling would follow me. I couldn't escape it, and that was when I realized I wasn't just seeing things anymore. The reflection wasn't just wrong, it was watching me, it was waiting for me. I never imagined things would get this far, or that I'd become a prisoner to something as ordinary as my own reflection. But now, I knew this was only the beginning. I spent the next few days trying to avoid mirrors altogether. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground whenever I passed a reflective surface, but even then, the feeling of being watched was inescapable. It wasn't just that I feared seeing something unsettling again. It was that I knew I would. The connection between me and my reflection had become a twisted, unpredictable thing, and no matter how hard I tried to look away, it was always there, lurking just behind the glass, waiting. It started small. The reflection became more erratic, like it was no longer simply mirroring my movements. It wasn't enough to be subtle anymore. It was as if it was growing stronger, more forceful. At times, it seemed to mock me. I'd catch a glimpse of myself in the corner of my eye, and in those fleeting moments, my reflection would smile in a way that I hadn't. It would frown when I was happy, scowl when I smiled. The strangest part, though, was that it seemed to move without me. I was brushing my hair in the bathroom one evening, not paying much attention when I saw it. In the mirror, my reflection lifted its hand and reached out as if to touch the glass. I froze mid-motion, watching as my reflection's fingers pressed against the mirror. But I hadn't moved yet. I had done nothing. My breath caught in my throat. The reflection didn't just stop when I did. No, it lingered there, pressing against the cold surface of the mirror almost as though it were trying to break through. Its face was eerily calm, the smile still there, but something had shifted. It wasn't just the expression, it was the intensity. The eyes, those eyes, which had once looked like mine, now seemed darker, almost hollow. They no longer felt familiar. They were empty. I stepped back from the mirror, trying to steady myself. My hand was trembling as I wiped the mist from the glass. When I looked again, the reflection was just as it had been moments ago, still and blank, an exact replica of me. It was as if nothing had happened, as if my mind had played tricks on me. But deep down, I knew it hadn't. I knew what I'd seen. That night I slept poorly, tossing and turning, constantly waking up to the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of my reflection would invade my thoughts, and each time, it felt more alive, more present. I could hear whispers in the dark, low, unintelligible murmurs, as though the reflection was trying to speak to me. When I woke up the next morning, my reflection greeted me as usual, yet again, it felt different. The more I looked at it, the more I realized that I couldn't see the small details that once made me me. My hair looked too messy, my eyes too wide, my expression too blank. It was as if my reflection was exaggerating my features, distorting them until I didn't even recognize myself. And the eyes, those eyes were still darker, more hollow than before. I wondered if I looked like that in reality, or if it was just the reflection warping things again. I tried to leave the house, but the moment I stepped out, the overwhelming sensation of being followed hit me like a physical force. The air seemed thicker, as though something was closing in on me. Every time I passed a store window, a car mirror, or even a puddle of water, I couldn't help but glance at my reflection, and every time, it was the same. My reflection wasn't just wrong. It was alive, and it was waiting. Then, on the third night after my discovery, things escalated. I'd been staying up late, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I suddenly felt the urge to check my reflection again. I wasn't sure why, but something compelled me to do it, as if I needed to know, needed to prove something to myself. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my hallway, heart pounding in my chest, and stared. For a long moment, nothing happened. I felt foolish. I told myself to walk away, but I couldn't. It was as though my reflection was pulling me in, drawing me deeper into its web. Slowly, hesitantly, I raised my hand to touch the mirror, and that's when it happened. My reflection didn't just mimic me, it moved first. It reached out to me with its cold fingers, not waiting for me to make the first move, as it always had. My breath caught in my throat as the reflection's fingers pressed against the glass, my world, my reality. I tried to pull back, but the image in the mirror seemed to draw me in as if its touch was real, not just a reflection. It was no longer a passive mimicry. It was reaching out, stretching its fingers toward me, trying to take me. I staggered backward, my heart racing. It was happening again. The thing I feared, the thing I couldn't explain. The reflection wasn't just following my movements anymore. It was actively trying to engage with me as though it had developed its own will, its own hunger. I ran from the mirror, my mind spinning, panic flooding my veins. I could feel the coldness of its touch lingering on my skin even though I hadn't actually been touched. It was the same sickening feeling I had experienced when it smiled at me, like something was pressing in from the outside. Something that didn't belong, something that wanted me. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. I saw the reflection in the mirror, its eyes following me, its smile twisted and mocking. I wasn't sure if it was a dream or if it had somehow entered my mind, but I couldn't escape it. The reflection was everywhere, in everything, always watching, always waiting. I thought about leaving, about running far away from the mirror, from the reflection that had invaded my life, but where could I go? It was already here. It had already taken hold, and then I understood. This wasn't just a game. The reflection wasn't just some eerie quirk of a mirror. It was alive, and it wasn't going to stop until it had me. I tried to fight it, but it was too late. The reflection had grown far too powerful. The worst part? I had no idea what it would do next. I woke up the next morning, my body stiff and exhausted from a night spent tossing and turning, unable to escape the oppressive presence of my reflection. It was as if the mirror had become my entire reality, trapping me inside its cold glass prison. My eyes darted around the room, and for a fleeting moment I thought I could feel it, the presence of it, that malicious dark entity that had taken over my reflection. I rushed to the bathroom, unable to face another day of unease, but when I saw myself in the mirror, I froze. For the first time, I didn't see myself. It wasn't a lag, a strange delay in movements, or even a slight distortion. It was a complete takeover. My reflection stood there, not mimicking me, but acting of its own accord. The moment I stepped into the bathroom, my reflection turned to face me, and for a second, I thought I saw it smile, not my smile, but something darker. It was a grin that made my skin crawl, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The eyes, those hollow black eyes, seemed to bore into mine, as if it was reading my every thought. I stepped back, trying to shake the feeling that it was no longer just a reflection, but a sentient being watching me, waiting. I felt an overwhelming urge to look away, to shut my eyes, to pretend none of it was happening, but I couldn't. I couldn't look away from the mirror. There was a compulsion now, an almost magnetic pull, that kept me in place. And then it happened. The reflection didn't just stand still. It moved. It raised its hand slowly, deliberately, and as my own hand remained frozen at my side, my reflection reached toward the mirror, pressing its palm against the glass, just like it had done days before. Only this time, the movement was more fluid, more purposeful, as if it was preparing to break through. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to leave. I needed to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. My mind screamed at me to move, to do anything, but all I could do was watch as my reflection seemed to grow bolder. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. But when I turned away, I saw it again. The reflection followed me. Not just the physical movements, I saw the shift in its expression, the way it seemed to become more aware. It was no longer just an image in the glass. It was like an entity, a living thing that mirrored my every action, but with a twist, with its own intentions. I was terrified. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I was losing control. I was losing myself. That evening, I tried to shake it off. I convinced myself that maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew the truth. The reflection wasn't just a reflection anymore. It wasn't a mere image. It was something more, something alive. As night fell, I wandered through my apartment trying to distract myself with anything, but the shadows felt deeper than they ever had before. The quiet seemed too loud. It was as if the reflection had infected every part of my mind, every corner of my life. At one point, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror again. I didn't plan to look, but my body moved on its own. It was as though I was being drawn to it, helpless to resist. My reflection stood there, staring back at me, but this time, There was something different. It wasn't mimicking me, it was waiting for me to make a move, to do something, anything. My reflection didn't look like me anymore. It wasn't just that it was wrong, number, it was becoming something else. The eyes, that once familiar gaze, now stared at me with an emotion that was utterly foreign. There was hunger in those eyes. There was intention. It wasn't just watching anymore. It was preparing for something. Then, I saw it. It reached up and touched the mirror. And this time, the glass didn't just ripple, the glass shifted. The reflection's hand passed through it as if the barrier was no longer there. I took a step back, my legs weak. I felt the blood drain from my face, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My reflection was coming through. It was no longer confined to the glass. It was breaking free. Its fingers curled around the edge of the mirror as it pulled itself forward. The reflection didn't wait for me to react. It came for me. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped back, panic rising in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. My reflection was here, in front of me, realer than it had ever been. The reflection wasn't mimicking me anymore. It was me. But it wasn't. It was something else. Something that had been growing inside that mirror. Something that had fed off my fear, my confusion, my every doubt. I had given it life, and now it wanted more. It stood before me, the distorted version of myself. That twisted, hollow-eyed version of me. It smiled again, but this time, the grin wasn't just a mockery. It was a challenge I wasn't prepared for. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. I reached out to push it away, but as my hand touched the mirror, it was cold. So cold. Colder than anything I'd ever felt. The reflection's hand, now fully through the glass, brushed against my fingers, sending a jolt of icy terror through my body. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was real. In that moment, I realized the truth. It wasn't just trying to replace me. It was taking me. It was using the mirror to reach out, to pull me into its world. It had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to lose control. I stepped back, my head spinning, but it followed. Every move I made, it mirrored with its own twisted version, closer and closer. And then, as I stumbled backward, I felt a tug, a sharp, pulling force. And for the first time, I realized that the reflection was pulling me in. It wasn't just watching me anymore. It was trying to take me. And this time, I couldn't escape. I had no idea what it wanted. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer in control. The reflection was in charge now, and I was powerless to stop it. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at my reflection, my hands still trembling from the cold touch of its fingers. The glass that had once felt so solid, so ordinary, now seemed like a thin veil separating two worlds, one where I was still me, and the other where I was nothing more than a shadow. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were anchored to the ground as though the reflection had rooted me in place. The hunger in its eyes, that unnatural gleam, pulled at me, tugging on my very soul. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but the reflection stood in front of me, still smiling that twisted grin, its hollow eyes never leaving mine. And then, it spoke. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't even a voice at all. It was a whisper, but not from its mouth. It came from everywhere, from inside my head, inside my very being. You are mine now. I staggered back, my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't break the connection. The reflection's smile deepened, its eyes growing darker, more insistent. It didn't move, at least not in a way I could see, but its presence pressed down on me like an invisible force. It was as if the reflection was somehow inside me, in my thoughts, my very identity. I wanted to look away. I wanted to turn and run out of that room, but the fear kept me paralyzed. No matter where I went, no matter how fast I moved, I knew it would follow. It was already inside of me, and the reflection was no longer just in the glass. It was alive, and it was taking me. In that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't just a supernatural phenomenon. It wasn't a trick of the mind. The reflection had always been there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to break free. It had fed off my doubts, my isolation, my fear. It had been growing stronger, inching closer, waiting for the right crack in the wall to slip through. It had been feeding off me. It had always been feeding off me. I tried to shout, to yell, to demand that it leave me alone, but nothing came out. I couldn't even hear my own voice in my head. The reflection's grip was suffocating, like a vice closing in on my very sense of self. It wasn't just a mirror anymore. It wasn't just a glass surface reflecting my image. It was a doorway, a gateway to something other, something darker, and that something wanted me. It didn't just want my image. It wanted my soul, my existence. The reflection seemed to grow more confident, more alive. It reached out again, only this time. It didn't stay behind the glass. It was right there, in front of me, stepping out of the mirror and into the room, the glass rippling like water as its hand passed through. Its cold fingers brushed against my cheek, sending a shock of ice through my body. My mind screamed for me to run, to fight, to do something, anything, but I couldn't. I felt as though I was trapped in my own skin, helpless, unable to stop the inevitable. It's too late. The thought echoed in my mind, clearer than anything else. It wasn't just my reflection anymore. It had become me. I felt its power wrapping around me, suffocating me as it moved closer. The darkness in its eyes was now all I could see. It wasn't just mocking me anymore. It was taking me, slowly, methodically, until I was nothing but a shell, a hollow, empty vessel, and it would be in control. My reflection, no, it wasn't me anymore, began to speak again, but this time, its voice was stronger, more insistent. You will disappear. You will become me. The words were cold, final. But then, something inside me shifted. A flicker of resistance, a whisper of defiance. I was still here. I was still me. I tried to pull away from the reflection, to fight it, but the coldness wrapped around me like chains. The glass felt like it was pulling me in, like it wanted to swallow me whole. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sight of my own twisted reflection. I tried to focus on who I was. I am me. I am not you. The reflection, still smiling, seemed to be watching me struggle. It wasn't in a rush. It was in control now. It was getting what it had always wanted. But I wasn't giving up. I didn't know what was happening or how I would escape. But in that moment, I realized something. The reflection had taken everything from me. It had taken my identity, my sense of self. But it had never taken my will. It had never taken my fight. And that was what I had to hold on to. I took a deep breath, forcing my eyes open. The reflection was standing there, inches from me, that dark smile still on its face, its hand now reaching for my throat. The air around me was thick with dread, but I wouldn't let it break me. I reached out, my hand trembling as I pressed it against the glass. I wasn't sure what I was doing, or why I was doing it, but in that moment, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let the reflection win. And for the first time since this nightmare had started, I wasn't sure if I would be able to escape, but I would fight. I had to. I never expected to fall for her. But here I am, trapped in something I can't explain. A touch, a moment, and now everything's changed. I crossed a line, and now I can't tell if I'm the one losing control or if it was always meant to happen. What are we now? Let me know what you think in the comments. Am I just fooling myself?